Bitcoin supply squeeze. Now, the Bitcoin supply squeeze is something that you've probably heard us talk about. We had Will Clemente on the show on Friday. He was talking about this as well. And a lot of folks in the comments are asking, what the hell is a supply squeeze? How does it work? So I'm going to do my best to explain to you what the supply squeeze is, and then we're going to look at some updated information on it. But the idea behind the supply squeeze is there are mainly three different numbers that you need to be aware of. The first number is the total number of Bitcoin. 21 million Bitcoin will ever exist. Outside of the 21 million Bitcoin, there are Bitcoins in circulation, meaning the Bitcoins that have now come into the market and are circulating around. That is about 89, almost 90% of the 21 million. So about 18.7, 18.8 million Bitcoin, just below 18.8 million Bitcoin are actually in circulation. 21 million total ever, 18.8 million are in circulation. But of those that are in circulation, we can tell on a blockchain exactly where they land or where they are sitting. And what we find is that we can monitor how many of those Bitcoin of the 18.8 million in circulation are on exchanges versus sitting in some sort of illiquid entity. Now, the reason why being on an exchange is important is because the main way that people buy and sell Bitcoin is on an exchange. So if I don't have my Bitcoin on the exchange, I am unlikely to be selling the Bitcoin. It also means that anyone who's looking to buy Bitcoin cannot buy my Bitcoin because I don't have my Bitcoin on the exchange. So the more Bitcoin that are off the exchanges, it means the less Bitcoin that are on the exchange. You don't have to be a scientist or a genius to know that. Now, when we start to look at the data, what we can see is that the illiquid supply, the amount of Bitcoin that is sitting in these entities where they are not sitting on the exchanges, has hit an all-time high recently over the weekend. And so Will posted this photo on Twitter. And when you look at it, you can see on the left side how many Bitcoin are actually sitting in the illiquid supply. And you can see the price on the right. Now, what is fascinating about this is the fact that the illiquid supply it ends up being very tied to price. Why? If more and more Bitcoin are coming off of exchanges, it means there's less Bitcoin on the exchanges to buy. As more people come into the market, they look to actually purchase the Bitcoin that is available. But if they don't have enough Bitcoin to buy, they have to start paying more and more. And so we can see on this chart here, going back to August 2020, Bitcoin was sitting down around, let's say, $10,000, give or take. And you can see that with that gold price schedule, that illiquid supply, you can see that the price and the illiquid supply both moved upwards. Now, what that means in practice, if you're not looking at the graph, is basically the idea that I have Bitcoin, and so did millions of people around the world. When the institutions showed up in Q3 and Q4 of 2020, they said, we would like to buy Bitcoin for $10,000. And some people sold them the Bitcoin, but not enough to satisfy the demand of the institutions. So the institutions said, you know what? I'll pay $12,000 for your Bitcoin. Now I'll pay 15, then 20. And at each time they started to bid more and more for Bitcoin, Bitcoiners said, I'm not selling. About 56%, give or take, of Bitcoin has not moved in the last 12 months. Even though the price had appreciated hundreds of percent, it had drawn down 50%, lots of volatility, but over 50% of Bitcoin did not move in the last year. And so what that means is no matter how much they bid from a price standpoint, Bitcoiners were not willing to sell their Bitcoin to these new buyers. And so the institutions went from 10,000 to 15 to 20 to 25, 30, 35,000, 40,000, 45, 50, 55,000, 60,000. At one point, people were willing to pay $64,000 per Bitcoin. Well, a lot of that was driven by the fact that when Bitcoin was being bought on the exchanges, people were then pulling it off. So there was less and less Bitcoin on those exchanges. And so you saw the price continue to appreciate. We then obviously had a market correction. When you go up hundreds of percent, obviously you're not going to just go up forever. And so when that market correction occurred, there was tons of liquidations, the price drew down, and we kind of settled around $30,000 to $40,000. And so we've kind of been consolidating sideways for a while. But recently, as you see in the chart here, you can see with that gold kind of line that the illiquid supply has begun to rise again. And so when the illiquid supply continues to rise, meaning that more and more Bitcoin is coming off of the exchanges and sitting in the illiquid entities, it is a good indicator. It is not a guarantee, but it is a good indicator that the price will have to increase over time because there is a less supply available. That is where you get this idea of a supply shock. As the supply gets smaller and smaller and smaller, the addressable circulating supply, as that shrinks down, new demand has less Bitcoin available to it to buy, and therefore, if they want to increase how much Bitcoin they can buy, they have to bid a higher and higher price, pulling the entire market up. So that is how a supply shock works.